Hi there once again. I'm back, new posting, and something utterly different. But just in case, would you look behind me and make a note of Vin Rogers Jr.? That's how you get a hold of me. You can get me on the internet that way, through any of the search engines, but particularly YouTube, you can get me. I've had a number of postings here, but this one I think should be very interesting because it's a sort of a two-part thing. We're going to be talking about Penn State and their football program, this pedophile by the name of Gary Sandusky, and we're going to be talking about the other side of the coin, really, which is the Catholic Church and their experience with similar scandals. Essentially what you have here is Penn State, which is, I don't know, it's some sort of a seventh heaven for football players. And the coach, a guy by the name of Joe Paterno, he's, how shall I say, he's at the right hand of God, you know. Jesus, your mother, just go that way. Joe's going to sit there. Sit down, Joe. And this is how he is that close. And as far as the university is concerned, there can be nothing better than this man. He resigned in disgrace, and we'll get to the reason for that. But what I'd like to do is treat this whole scandal in a chronological way, because the newspapers haven't been doing it that way, and I think it would become much clearer what crimes were involved in all of this and how they parallel precisely the same things that happened in the Catholic Church. In the case of Penn State, people were punished, lost their jobs, and there is criminal liability. Case of Catholic Church, you have bishops, you have cardinals, you have archbishops that have been responsible for exactly the same sorts of crimes. They have gone totally unpunished. Now here is a case of Gary Sandusky of Penn State. He was an assistant coach for many, many years under Joe Paterno, this saintly sort of fellow. He was I think a defensive coach for the football team. For years on end, there had been rumors floating about good old Gary Sandusky and his rather too much interest in very young boys. He even founded a charity, which is a large one, and backed by many corporate adventure, and also by the university itself. It's for wayward boys, that sort of thing, and it's called Second Mile. Now, the people that are in that organization are there for a good purpose. I don't think he was. I think he was there for one purpose, and that was to groom young lads for his sexual exploits. And he liked them young. One of the ones that blew up this whole thing was a 10-year-old. Now, the political connections in this thing, you don't get the full feeling of it unless you look at this thing chronologically. You're going to find some strange stuff here, ladies and gentlemen. You really will. In 1998, a woman goes to the police there in, I don't know, Altoona, or wherever the university is, and she's complaining about the fact that her son has been molested, and she's not going away. She is not going away. And the police pay attention to her, and they decide what they will do is they will wire her. That is, put a tape recorder, you know, this very tiny one, and they can get a tape of the thing. And the two police officers are in her house, hidden away, and the woman is there, her son, and this Gary Sandusky, the coach, has been invited to come over. And she confronts him immediately for having molested her son, and he admits it. He says, I'm just terribly sorry. I mean, I have this compulsion. I really shouldn't be doing these things. And that was that. The police take the case to the district attorney, a guy by the name of Ray Gricar, G-R-I-C-A-R. You can look him up on the internet if you want. He takes a look at this case and mulls it over and one thing and another, and he decides not to prosecute. Extraordinary. I mean, you've got the guy's confession on tape. No, don't prosecute the guy. Now, the next thing down the line, and I'm going to introduce this to you, but then we'll put it aside until later. This is 2002. A young graduate student there at Penn State, he's also on the coaching staff, by the name of Mike McCreary. He goes into the kind of faculty area in the athletic department where they have, you know, showers and that for faculty members and so forth. And it's very late at night, and he's quite surprised to hear the water running. He comes into the shower room, and what he finds is a boy 10 years old, he thought, with his hands against the wall, and he's being buggered by Gary Sandusky. Wow. McCreary leaves, goes home. Now, at this point, what he should have done was to pick up the phone and telephone the police. He has seen a felony. The law requires him to report it. He does not. He tells his father. What the hell good's that? Well, he tells his father. That's grand. So the next day, he now tells two people at the university who are well connected. One was the vice president of the university, a guy by the name of Gary Schultz. And he also tells the athletic director, a very important position, a Tim Curley. He tells those gentlemen what he saw. They, in turn, tell the president of the university, Graham Spanier, and they also tell Joe Paterno, the coach. That's it. Nothing further happens. 2002. 2005, you'll recall I was telling you about Ray Ricard, the DA who decided not to prosecute. 2005, very strange thing happens. He gets up, he has a live-in girlfriend, gets in his little Mini Cooper and drives off. He has his laptop with him. And he parks it in a downtown area, walks away about noon, and he's never seen again. His laptop is found in the Susquehanna River. I guess that's where the Susquehanna run in that area. So, well, anyway, found in a river, missing its hard drive. However, further investigation, they find the hard drive a little further down in the river, but so destroyed that they can get no useful information. Ray Ricard has never been seen again. Now, in the year of 2011, owing to some more complaints regarding Gary Sandusky and boys, the grand jury takes up the whole matter once again, and one of the things that pops up immediately is this matter of the 2002 incident in that shower. It's absolutely crucial. Here they have an eyewitness, they have the boy, and then they have McCreary. They have what they want. They've got him nailed. Well, it comes out. First of all, the grand jury renders a bill, an indictment against Sandusky, arrests him. This goes all over the wires, all over the United States. Big news. This was on page 1. And this was even carried on as the first story on national television. That's how big it was. Why? Because of Joe Paterno. Next to God, don't you know? All these years, these people knew, of course, they knew about this Sandusky. They had done absolutely nothing. Now, you know, other people should have been careful and cautious, but no, not so. Sandusky goes before the judge. It's a Judge Leslie Dutchcott. And she looks down at him and she says, well, we'll make bail on this case of $100,000. Unsecured bail. Here's a man who is being charged with 40 counts, felonies, a fraction of which would put him in jail for the rest of his life. And you're requiring a $100,000 bail? Totally inadequate. But not merely that, he doesn't even put up any money. He doesn't put up any bond. It's unsecured. It's absolutely astonishing. Turns out that the judge is a frequent volunteer and associated with Gary Sandusky's charity, the Second Mile thing I was telling you about for wayward youth. Wouldn't you suppose she'd had the good sense to get out of the way? She hasn't even recused herself at this point from the trial. She might well be the trial judge. It's very strange things. Turns out that that before, or I should say after that Ray Ricard disappeared, they had a new DA. It was a Lynn Abraham, a lady, and who's supposedly tough as nails. Well, she finally quit the DA's office, and guess what she does now? She is the general counsel for the Second Mile organization of Sandusky's. And the new DA there in town is Linda Kelly, and she's complaining that they are getting no cooperation from the Second Mile organization in regard to these matters, nor from Penn State. Now, in a case like that, you would have assumed that Miss Lynn Abraham would have had the good sense to resign her position as general counsel to that charity, given the circumstances, but so far she hasn't done that. I mean, it's just unbelievable. These people, this is the kind of glue that this crazy football situation has with Joe Paterno and all that sort of thing. And you get a glimpse of the same sort of thing in the Catholic Church, though they're rather more clever at handling it. And just to give you an idea, in the very area where this is all occurring, Penn State, you have the Diocese of Altoona. And there were 24 priests in that diocese who were credibly charged with molesting boys. And they all got a letter, apparently almost like a form letter, from the bishop. And he's telling them the following. The last line of the letter, I think, is very instructive. The priests have made the confession. The bishop knows exactly what's happening. Everything. He says, painful as the situation is, we must safeguard your good name, protect the priestly reputation, and prevent scandal from touching the church, even if unjust. In other words, the man is, the bishop is, in effect, he's guilty of a misprision of a felony. He's an accessory after the fact. He's involved in an obstruction of justice. All those things are involved here. It's absolutely incredible stuff. But how does the Catholic Church get away with it where these people didn't? Well, the football crowd, they weren't quite prepared, but the church was. And the church now likes to say something to the effect, they say, this was for us a learning experience. Ad hoc bullshitum ad nauseam. Yeah, learning experience. Well, learning experience by foot. It started really, first hit in a small parish in Louisiana in 1985. What happened was a young lad, I think he was 12 or 13, was admitted to the hospital with anal bleeding. He had been raped by the priest. Pretty hard to keep that under wraps, though they tried. Other parents came forth, and there were 6, and they all sued the diocese for the molestation, and the church paid, and paid well. They were offered $20 million to keep a lid on this thing. One family would not go along with it, and they sued the church in open court. Despite the fact that the judge had tried to even cover that up, he couldn't. It was a weekend, and the Associated Press caught the item. It went all over the United States. Good time to get in that kind of news, is, you know, nothing much is doing over weekends, and so the AP picked this up, went all over the United States. Well, as a consequence of that, they started popping up all over the place. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, New York, Chicago. The lid was lifted, and it turned out that there were just tens of thousands of people who had been abused by the church, thousands of priests involved. And so far, as I stand here, we don't even know how many billions the church has poured out to try to keep a lid on this thing. But how did they keep the lid on, and how were they able to survive even until the year of about 2002, when finally the bishops had to admit that they were licked on this thing? Well, the first thing to do, if a parent makes the first mistake they instantly make, is to go to the archbishop or to the residence and complain. They shouldn't. Go to the police. That's the way to do it. You go to the police. They'll get a hold of the bishop. So that they go to the bishop's residence, and the moment that it's found out what they're there for, they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, the bishop. He's off. You know, we don't even know where he is. You know, he's a very strange man. He has so much duties. We don't know where he is. What's your problem?" Once they find that out, then the cover-up begins in earnest. They'll say, well, this is the first time we've ever heard of anything like that regarding Father Ticklefinger. No, you must be mistaken. Well, they're lying through their teeth right there, because they have heard of it, because they've had hundreds of complaints from Father Ticklefinger. Another approach is they say, oh, well, you must be mistaken. He's a very affectionate man. He just loves to hug. Well, that's not what the parents are complaining about. Hugging is one thing. What Father Ticklefinger does is quite another. Then the suggestion is, well, maybe, are you sure your son's telling the truth? Is he, you know, we have had some experience there in the parochial school. They say he's a bad boy. In other words, trying to make him the big, you know, to make the father a victim. And then they'll try to say, do you have any idea what you're going to do to the church by raising these issues? I mean, you're going to lose all kinds of friends, and so are you sure you want to pursue something like this? Or another tactic is, let's take the boy, let's go take him to confession. Let's have him go to confession. Well, you see, that serves two purposes. Once again, it suggests the idea that the boy is at fault, and secondly, they can gather very important information about how far this has gone. And so that's another suggestion. Then they try to, instead of offering, how shall I say, pastoral care to the child that's been abused, what they do is suggest pastoral care for Father Ticklefinger. Let's go into chapel now. Let's get on our knees and let's pray for poor Ticklefinger. He's so sorry about this thing. Or how about, let's pray for Ticklefinger's mother. She's going to be just simply horrified when she finds out. Oh, you don't want to pursue this matter. Well, you'll only traumatize the boy. Don't you see that? Right now he bears no scar, but if you raise an issue, you're going to traumatize him. It'll just be terrible. Not alone that, we're going to take Father Ticklefinger. We're going to get him into medical care. It'll take care of it. We'll go further than that. We'll even make sure that he's out of the priesthood. All of this is false, every single bit of it. Then they have a series of dirty tricks they'll try to pull. One of the ones was in Kansas City, where they said there was a helpline where any Catholic whose children had been abused, phone this helpline and you'll get help. But you're going to get help from mental health professionals. So they phoned the thing, and of course they're engaged in conversation and everything else. They weren't health professionals at all. They were priests who had law degrees and practiced law in the state. In other words, they were gathering information so they could defeat any suit when it came up. A church involved in enterprises of that kind. Another one, of course, is to blackball a person who brings the thing. Spread the word out into the congregation about this parent who's just trying to destroy a whole image of the church and all. And then another thing that they can do is to send detectives out on the parents. They did that in the case of Chicago. Cardinal Bernardin himself was responsible for this outrage. Detectives going in there, have you heard anything about the mother? Is she at wild parties? Is she into drinking? They go dancing. Do you ever see her with a different man? That kind of thing. Imagine a cardinal in the Catholic Church authorizing anything like that. And what about the law firms that would even go along with a thing like that? Just shysters, that's a pack of them. There is one final defense the church has, which was unavailable to Joe Paterno and his football gang, and that is the nuncio in Washington, D.C. The nuncio is like the ambassador. He represents the Vatican in all matters. And what you do is you take all official records having to do with a priest, where there have been previous complaints and all the rest of it. You take those and you send them to the nuncio's office in Washington, D.C., and the moment it crosses that threshold, it has diplomatic immunity. They're beyond the reach of U.S. courts. So to give you some idea, it's amazing, as I say, the church was able to, at great cost, incidentally. You would imagine nowadays who would be going to church. They still do. I sometimes drive by. You'll be driving by a parochial school and hear the children are playing. I absolutely marvel that any parent would send their child to a parochial school, because I can tell you this right now: if something befalls that child in terms of molestation, they're going to do exactly what they always do. They're going to use every device in the world to deny it, and they will do nothing in the way of pastoral care. So we come full circle. I wonder what there is about football that raises it to this height. It's almost a cult. I remember years ago seeing Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. Maybe many of you have seen that, where this salesman whose life is just a shambles. He has yet one hope. His son, he thinks, was a great athlete, which of course was not the case. He thinks that the son, in cooperation with others, can open a great, huge store, you know, with sports goods and everything, and all this everything. It's almost a replication of Joe Paterno and all of these people at Penn State. The glories of football that trump everything. Decency, honor, nothing counts but that football. And incidentally, the money raised is in just immense amount of it, something on the order of $75 million a year, raised clear money by the football. I think values here, isn't it strange? Somehow they sure as hell got trumped. I'll see you another time. Maybe I'll be more cheerful. But it just struck me that this is pretty awful stuff. So for now, goodbye.